Good morning. Thank you for everyone to being here. Uh, uh, I would like to say something about my career. I began with continental philosophy in Rio de Janeiro, and then I moved to metaphysics and then to analytic philosophy. And then during the pandemics, for existential reasons, I began to research philosophy of religion. And my subject is it's Christian philosophy, and I study the problem of uh, life after death and the discussion about resurrection immediately after death. It's a very interesting topic because it's a discussion inside Christianity among philosophers and theologians, and it has to do with metaphysics of time, what happens in the afterlife. Maybe there is no time, God is atemporal, and when we die, we move immediately to this new world, and according to Christianity, we resurrect as persons just at the moment of dying, because there is no after. There is no moment after we die, because there is no time and neither space. And then in this discussion, I have discovered the idea of negative eschatology. It was an article by Thomas Halleck. He's a theologian who won the Templeton Prize, I think 2014. It's very interesting because we really don't know what happened in the afterlife, if there is one. And so this idea of negative eschatology, based on hope, we just have to hope that there is something, and how it will look like, we can only expect to see later. And then from negative eschatology, I moved to negative theology, and then it's the topic I will try to speak about. And just the idea, when I saw the title of this conference, Concepts of God, I thought, yeah, there are many concepts. Which one is the right one? Who is God, if there is a God or many gods? And then I have thought it's interesting to put all this discussion, the possible ways to understand the nature of God, by means of the method of negative theology. And I think it's interesting. It's a philosophical method, and we will see what it looks like. We notice a kind of conceptual fuzziness among these concepts. We had a kind of increasing in philosophical aspects of the concept. We have the religions, then we have theology, which tries to understand the religions. Then we have philosophical theology, is a way to try to think philosophically about theology. And then we have natural theology, the idea that we can prove or justify God's existence through naturalism, through the physics, the scientific theories. We have analytic theology. I don't know if this ordering is the right one. It's just a way to think about this concept. Then we have philosophy of religion, and then analytic philosophy of religion. And we see that, for example, in Stanford Encyclopedia, I have found this entry. For example, philosophy and Christian theology. It deals with the relationship between both. We can see integration or contrast. Integration is the best possibility, and conflict is the worst one. And between them, we have some different possibilities of dialogue between philosophy and theology, especially Christian. And for example, I will use some sources of Christian theology because it's my background, but we can apply this to other religions. For example, this idea, philosophical theology is a branch of philosophy of religion. Philosophical theology is more comprehensive than natural theology. We have sense experience, scientific knowledge, and together religious experience and revelation. And these are some sources of the stuff we work with. And premise of philosophical theology, if there is a God and God is impassible, as the Christianity says, what does this imply for our understanding of the nature of God and God's attributes as mercy and love? So we assume as a hypothesis, if God is so and so, what consequences can we extract from this assumption and the nature of God according to this model? And there were some objections in the book of Aaron Simons, Contemporary Debates in Negative Theology and Philosophy. Philosophers of religion were criticized by having this cognitivism, prioritizing belief over practice. It's narrow, it focuses on Christianity and not the other traditions. It can be insular in the sense of there is no engagement with other disciplines like maybe philosophy, science, psychology, and so on. And other criticisms. Analytic philosophy of religion maybe it's too theological or too analytic. And philosophers of religion work in this echo chamber of epistemic bubble. It rejects pluralism, not reflects the diversity of religions and non-religious viewpoints, and so on. Among these objections to philosophy of religion in our days, we have this idea of Christian tradition. And I think this conference is just an attempt to try to improve this plurality with underrepresented traditions. And we have this ontotheology, the idea that God is a possible object of knowledge. Apart from revelation, it's a Christian idea. We have God is an object to be discovered, just like we have the object of the mind or the physical universe. There is this univocal account of language. We don't have it. It's a kind of we have analytical, very rational and univocal language instead of this kind of poetic or metaphorical language that we find in mysticism. We will see in a minute. So how could we try to answer for these criticisms, these objections? One possible way, it's not the only one, but I think it's a path, is just apophatic or negative theology. It's a Greek word, which means saying no, saying negatively. It's via negativa in Latin language. This apophatic can also mean revelation, but it's a broader sense. It's not the revelation we have in Christianity. What's the idea? Transcendence places God beyond all human categories. God is off limits epistemically. we cannot know who God is. And all our attempts to speak of God are invalid. We cannot say what God is, but only what God is not. What he really is, we cannot know. Not in 1,000 years with all scientific knowledge and theories about everything, we could still not know anything about God. That's the premise. It's interesting because it's a mistake even to say that God exists. God is beyond being and non-being, much less than to say anything positive about God. God is and is not, God, because existence is a human concept. And to say that God exists is to say too much. There is a kind of logical failure regarding the law of non-contradiction. God is and God is not. Instead, the law of excluded middle, we have the law of included middle. Between any two opposite terms, there is a middle term that's neither A nor not A on its own. It may be both A and not A, as the law of contradiction allows, or neither. That is the law of non-identity. The origins of negative theology lies in Pseudo-Dionysius, the Areopagite. Is a theologian of the 1st and 6th century in his book on the divine names and mystical theology. Our talk involves affirmation and negation, but this negation, according to Dionysius, is not privative, but it's a kind of super affirmative. It's an infinite affirmation beyond any determination. What it means, but what is this super affirmation about God? It's just the idea God is beyond all our concepts. He is super eminently everything that we can say about him. The apophatic negation can be grasped at the confluence of three terms. Alterity, God is the absolute other. Transcendence, and excess, the idea of infinity. God is to be described not for what he is, but what for he is not. He is beyond all conceptual schemes. He's not conformed to any being, superior to all beings, and in this sense, a non-being or non-existence. I think in this case, being is also, it's been considered also as a human concept. Maybe we can say God is being, but it would be too much. God, it's at the same time a being and non-being, because these are concepts that we are using to try to comprehend what God is. And the idea is that cataphatic theology is just a first step in religious language, but it should be left behind, because in the end, we will only contemplate this ineffable God. So there is this idea of preparation. We use cataphatic theology, these affirmations about God, just as the first step to transcend these attempts. And still in this book, God has many names and no name. He surpasses every name, everything. And what we are left with? Just with our imagination, we can imagine every name for God. But we cannot end this process with a definite name or a definite property of God. In this book, we have some meanings of negative theology. It's a typology. in this article by Sarah Coakley, she studies Mother Teresa of Avila. It's a mystic woman in the medieval times. The first aspect, Pseudo-Dionysius, as we have seen, there is the idea of unsaying things about God. We negate the positive. This relationship between negation and affirmation can be dialectic, one corrects the other. Maybe negation is more fundamental, or negation should be negated as well. So we have a positive, but this is a process, a dialectic process that has no end. The second possibility with Meister Eckhart, it's a kind of asceticism, the soul's union with the divine. We detach ourselves from our ego desires. We open to divine presence. It's like the Eastern mystical traditions. There is the idea of emptiness. We have the Luther theology of the cross. It's kind of paradox. God is hidden and revealed at the same time. God reveals through Christ on the cross in weakness, and we only know God in weakness and suffering, just like our lives. And this is very interesting because what we know is our own suffering, because the hidden God is beyond any comprehension. Third possibility of understanding negative theology, it's John of the Cross, Second Night of the Spirit. It's very interesting. It's the idea of purification, involves pain, spiritual pride, to be purged, self-will. We have darkness, the absence of God, including mystical death. Only by dying in this life, in a metaphorical sense, can we find God. We don't need to wait for our physical death to meet God, but it must be a kind of spiritual death, as complete emptiness. These concepts are very interesting. And Simone Weil has this idea of God's presence as absence. God is absent from our world, but that's the way we can feel him. God withdraws so that we can freely choose him. There is a void, and this void produces in us a kind of love, longing, attention, just because God is absent. That's very interesting, because we will see it's impossible to have a union with God. That's too presumptuous, too much pride to imagine that we can feel God, perceive God. And we have Kant's noumenal darkness, the idea absence of knowledge, the world of the things in themselves are beyond our understanding. God is one of these things in themselves that we will never be able to apprehend, just like the soul, the free will, these metaphysical issues. We have just this connection between apophaticism and mysticism. The idea, it's not just a linguistic strategy. We cannot speak rationally about God. It has to do with the experience of life. It's a way of living. There is silence, ecstasy, passivity, contemplation. So mystical theology is very related to negative theology. As I have mentioned, it has to do with our existential experiences, a way of living, as I mentioned. We seek union of God beyond concepts, language. It's a spiritual discipline. We deconstruct forms of knowledge, perceive, loving. It's a program of living. We have a mystical theology in all religions. Like Christian mysticism, we have Sufism, Islamic mysticism, Buddhism, Zen, Dodgen, Hinduism, Taoism, and we'll see in this conference maybe some descriptions about this possible mystical experience in those other religions. And we have negative philosophy, which is related to negative theology. Just in Wittgenstein, in Tractatus, everyone knows these quotes. I will not read them, but the idea that metaphysics, things that we cannot speak about, we must be silent in front of them. And Kant and Wittgenstein are known by a kind of negative philosophy, in a sense. I think Wittgenstein more. And we have some worries about this method. Maybe this apophatic theology can be very thin. Should we stop doing philosophy of religion because there's nothing to say about God? What are you doing here? In a sense, it's like similar to skepticism. It might be self-defeating. When I say God is not what we think he is, or I know only what he's not, or I'm saying something about God, what he's not. And maybe this would be too much. So I should just remain silent and not even say that God isn't what we think he is, because that could be a mistake. Maybe he is, just like we say he is. It's like skepticism. Everything is, I cannot know anything, but I'm knowing that I don't have knowledge about anything. So there are some discussions about this possibility of self-contradiction in negative theology, negative philosophy, and some skeptical approach. So this worry, maybe every propositional content about God can be false or meaningless. It's possible. And what should we do? We have this kind of dialogue between philosophy of religion, analytic, continental philosophy of religion, negative theology, and there is this tension permanent between analytic philosophy of religion, negative theology. It's similar to cataphatic and apophatic theology. And maybe a possible way out of this kind of tension could be just the idea there is no possible way to use analytic method to speak about God. We are doing the opposite of analytic philosophy of religion or natural theology. We should use evocative language, creative use, poetry, a kind of metaphorical speech, maybe. And we have this idea, what is a religious experience? In the analytic tradition, we can say that someone has spoke about that. religious experience can be a source of knowledge. We have this sort of union with the divine, but the criticisms can be, as I said, it's impossible to be united with God. That's a criticism. It's present, this idea in Karl Barth, the theologian Protestant, who just, he was a kind of apophatic theologian, because the religious experience, it's a kind of non-experience. God is not there to be experienced. It's a kind of, the faith can be a kind of a leap into blindness. There is a crisis from our incapacity to perceive God. As I mentioned, faith is the silent obedience to the will of a God who remains silent. And so we think maybe apophatic tradition is not so much linked with mysticism the way we thought, because in mystical experience, we think that we can have a kind of relationship with God, and maybe this is not possible. The relation between apophaticism, agnosticism, and atheism, maybe it's a position, negative theology, about God's nature, not believing God's existence. Maybe it's a way to say that God exists, but in a more complex way. But we have some similarities between apophaticism, agnosticism, which separate them from atheism. Atheism is more dogmatic in the sense that God doesn't exist. The agnostic can say, yes, God may exist, but I'm not sure. And there is nowadays a more interesting concept of agnosticism, which is more complex and shows the vagueness in the border between negative theology and agnosticism. It's a very interesting topic. We have the idea of agnostic faith. It sounds contradictory, but it's a faith which assumes a kind of provisionality. I believe there is something, and I'm open, and it's a very modern term, and it fosters the dialogue among religions with other secular views. I will skip this. It's the idea of skepticism, the difference. It's a very contemporary concept. We have the individual experience, collective experience. We have now, it's a very interesting discussion about spirituality without religion, without God. We have some individual spirituality that precedes of a divine figure. It's a very interesting discussion. I took the liberty to apply this concept to tradition. I think that it is a framework with religions that are not codified, text-based, institutionality centralized, they do not have a theological tradition. It's the book by Portia, who is here, has been published. And it's just the idea of candomblé. We spoke about that before the conference. And I think it's a possible application of this concept just in the discussion about the philosophy of candomblé, which is considered a subtle thought not yet deciphered. And it's interesting the possible use of this method to the discussion inside candomblé and other Afro-Brazilian religions. For example, the concept of God in candomblé. There are three possible perspectives on candomblé supreme being, Olorum, Olodumare. We will see in the paper of Portia, I think tomorrow or the other day. This supreme being can be considered, according to the interpretation one has, as an omnipotent, omniscient, and omnibenevolent creator, or as a limited deity, like in some of the classical attributes of an omni-god, or first among equals. There is supreme authority of other divinities within their specific domains. So there are these three possible interpretations. One is more, has a Christian bias, the first one, and the others are more maybe faithful to the tradition of candomblé itself. But if you apply negative theology to this debate, we somehow refrain ourselves from trying to define the supreme being through these positive attributes. Rather than conceptualizing him as a perfect or not perfect or limited God and limited, we emphasize the mystery of the creator beyond human categories. Maybe he is genderless. Gender is a human category. And so by simultaneously affirming and denying the creator's nature, we try to grasp his transcendence. Maybe he's an icon and not a concept. And the mystery of Olorum Olodumare can also be observed negatively through, for example, the absence of monuments or sacrifices dedicated to him in Brazil, for example. Maybe this absence can be a sign of a kind of respectful consideration of his nature. The mystical nature of candomblé, which seeks union with the divine through sacrificial rites, dance, and spirit possession, highlights its affinity with apophaticism as a form of mystical theology. We will see in the other presentations. This tradition is oral, and its aspect allows for this flexibility in conceptualizing the gods, the deities, and it's an example of the limits of our interpretation based on the sources, ethnographic sources. It's difficult to interpret. If in Christianity we have already a doctrine, we have the books, the scriptures, and it's difficult to interpret them. Imagine in an oral tradition with other sources. So conclusions, it's about God's ineffability. We have this complementary relation between positive theology and negative theology. It's a method. It's just we need this complementarity. It's not only the negative aspect. We live in this complex pluralistic world. We have disagreements of all kinds. We have to accept these fuzzy boundaries between the opinions. We can temper dogmatism. We can temper our strong positions and fundamentalism, and endorse interreligious dialogue with other people, atheists, agnostics. We propose just the vigilant use of apophaticism. We are not renouncing the investigation of the religions. It's just a methodological stance that assumes the imperfections of our theories. I think it can be used in underrepresented religious traditions. It fosters intellectual humility. I think it's very important. There are other ways of expressing the divine, and I think this is just one way I'm proposing. That's it. It has to do with existentialism. We can have just both passive contemplation of God and at the same time active engagement as a possible path to the divine. And that's it. Thank you.